Let's go live. You know what? Ooh, let's change where that is. And let's try some different... Welcome to my chaos. The chaos that is my room. But, I am here. Turn that down. Let me turn my lights on. See, now I know I'm like an actual streamer because I have lights and everything. And I got my handy dandy notebook. This is not the notebook. This is my handy dandy notebook. This has all of my notes for every single episode of both House of the Dragon and Rings of Power. So let me just say on Instagram that I'm streaming. I should probably do that, you know. That's my job and everything. If you guys have watched it, if you guys have watched the episode, please do let me know. Hey everybody, I am live streaming. Click the link, come join me. There you go. See, that's the behind the scenes content you guys want. If you guys have watched it, what did you think of it? Of the finale episode? I mean, it's it ended, I think, in about the way that you expect the series to end, pretty much. As in, it like, I mean, when you're 7 episodes in, it's gonna end, and pretty much you're kind of like thinking, well, these things have got to happen, right, for the series to end. And yeah, obviously, everyone, spoilers. Should probably put that in the title, otherwise people will complain. Spoilers. So, well, we got Too Fast. He just instantly became Gandalf. It's not the Gandalf. I don't think it's Gandalf. I think it's one of the Blue Wizards, right? Because he goes to Run. And the Blue Wizards famously went off into the east. So I there's like a couple of lines which imply that he's Gandalf. Like he says at one point that I think I smell a good air going in this way. And there's a couple of times in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf like smells the right direction. There's something. But yeah, I think he's meant to be a blue wizard. So yeah. But just because he quotes Gandalf does not mean he's Gandalf. Like, the showrunners quote the books a lot. Like, for example, there's Hellbrand. At one point, he says, you know, you will be a queen who is stronger than the foundations of the earth, which is, you know, the Galadriel thing that she says in Fellowship of the Ring. Doesn't mean necessarily, you know, anything like that. But, yeah. So, there are definitely some weird changes to the lore in this episode. I mean, the biggest one being... Now, I might be wrong about this. I'm not actually 100% sure. But it seems like the 3 rings in the series were made before the other ones. My impression of the timeline, and forgive me if I'm wrong, was that Anatar, Sauron like come into Region being like a door-to-door salesman, you know, hey, you want to buy these life extension ring recipes? I can just imagine it. So yeah, and yes, there are 2 blue wizards. Guys, stop saying Celeborn is dead. I'm 90% sure. Yes, I know I'm out of focus because I have a crap camera. I'm 90% sure that Celeborn's like out there and Galadriel's gonna go find him. If he is dead, that's really funny. Because it's a weird change to make. Yeah, Sauron. Hashtag Sauron. I am so up for that. My impression though is that Sauron came to Eregion, to Celebrimbor as Anatar, and then they worked for a while with the Gwaith Myrdain and they forged like a ton of rings. Like apparently they just made a ton of magic rings doing a bunch of stuff. But especially they made the ones which would become the 7 and the 9. And then Anatar left and Celebrimbor made the 3. I don't know if in the lore, like, it's just Celebrimbor did them in secret, but Anatar was still there, or whether. But I always imagined it as Anatar left and then they made the 3. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why. It feels just like a really bizarre change in my brain. In my brain. Yeah, like the thing. So let's recap this episode, okay? So Halbrand. It's really funny. There's a really funny shot where, in slow motion again, where Galadriel is riding a horse. They're coming into Eregion, and in the background, Halbrand is just like, you know, it's not like when Frodo is dying from a Morgul blade, and you know, like Arwen or Glorfindel like holding him as she's like riding, trying to get him to Rivendell. Like, obviously Frodo's like dying, that's why he's doing this, but like Halbrand's on his own horse going like it was really funny. So anyways, Halbrand humps his way into Eregion, and then basically makes instant friends with Celebrimbor. Yeah, so undulating violently undulating. Yeah, I am correct. So yeah, Celebrimbor made 3 more. Yeah, he didn't. Yeah, okay, cool. Having him ride a horse while dying is the funniest decision. Absolutely, it was hilarious. I was just like, and then she goes like, "We've been riding for 5 days." I'm like, can you just imagine 5 days of him slowly, just more doing this? Like, oh, beautiful. So, yeah, they arrive in Eregion, and Elrond's like, "Ooh, what are you doing?" And Halbrand basically becomes instant friends with Celebrimbor because he has like smithing expertise, and then basically Celebrimbor is trying to find a way. The whole thing sounds like you have tried to make an adaptation of the Gospels about Jesus, but you only had access to Leviticus. That's no, even better. It's like you've only got access to the Book of Mormon or something. Yeah. So, anyways, Celebrimbor is basically trying to forge rings. So he's trying to forge something that allows them to stop the decay. That's like a Silmaril, which has the light of Valinor and the trees and like makes things alive again. And so he goes, I'm gonna you know make I'm gonna make a crown. It has to be a round thing, and it has to be a round thing. And of course, if you know the story, you're like watching this going, has to be a round thing, and everyone's going, a crown, something round, something round that could fit around a part of a body, like a crown or an anklet or a bracelet. Nah, we're not on it, guys. We're trying to find out. Oh, guys, yeah. And Halbrand at one point, he's talking with Celebrimbor, and he says, he's like, he's talking about the recipe of how to make this stuff, and because Celebrimbor's having some trouble, and he says, "Consider it a gift," which, like, if you don't know the books, is a pretty innocuous line, but if you know the books, it's like a character waving a red flag, going, "I'm Sauron," because Sauron in the books is called Anatar, and the name means Lord of Gifts. But this episode had a few other instances of subtlety, where my favorite one that actually made my partner laugh even more is that the stranger, who turns out to of course be one of the wizards, he eventually figures out who he is, and the whole point is, am I bad? Am I good? What am I? Am I Sauron? Because the episode starts. That's another thing. I'll talk about that in a second. But anyways, later on in the episode, he's trying to figure out, am I good or evil? And he has this moment where he's facing down against the cultists' peoples, and he stands up with his staff, and he goes, "I am good!" Which made me laugh, because I've never seen anything less subtle than that. Yeah, so there's that element to it. So yeah, I will say, so that's sort of the story. So Celebrimbor and Halbrand are working together, right? And they come up with ways to make the rings out of a mithril alloy. If I remember rightly, technically only one of the rings is actually mithril. I think the others were just like gold and silver. I don't really know. One of them had but the Nenya, Vilya, and Naya. So also, please do tell me, guys, what color would you guys like my room to be? Please tell me in the chat, and then I'll stop this absolutely. Please tell me in the chat which color I should be making my lights. Hey, you need anything from the store? No, I'm good! So they're getting along, and then Galadriel's getting like super suspicious because I am not keeping it flashing. Keep it getting super suspicious because Celebrimbor says, not power of the flesh, but over flesh. We got purple, red, green, purple, green, RGB, blue, all of them, orange, blue, green, purple, blue, turquoise, orange, green or purple, blue. I think blue is the most common, so we'll go with blue. All right, blue's the most common. Yeah, so Galadriel gets all suspicious. Now, in the lore, basically, Anatar as Sauron goes to all the different elven kingdoms and gets turned away from all of them except Eregion, which is run by Celebrimbor. Galadriel is the one that turns him away, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, that is, I think, where they're taking the kind of, Galadriel doesn't trust Halbrand here. So she gets suspicious, and she looks up, is there any king of the Southlands? Which is, of course, it's a really funny twist, because Galadriel is the only person who ever said there even was a king of the Southlands, and then, not even the people in the Southlands, not once, not once said, hey, we need a king. What happened to our king? The only thing is right at the end, Bronwyn goes, are you the king that we were promised? And he goes, yes, I am. So, and so, Galadriel is the only person that said he was the king, and then her revelation that he is not is really funny, because it's like, no one ever said you were the king except Galadriel. That is it. Like, I just find that really funny. Yeah, also, like, people saying, like, oh, it's a twist that Halbrand is Sauron. People are being a little bit too harsh on that. Like, that leaked months and months and months ago, so, like, people going, oh, it's so obvious to everyone. It's kind of like, well, I mean, we were told. And I mean, like, if you know the lore, it's kind of obvious, because there's so many little Sauron references with him, but that's kind of like saying, I've read the book, I know what's going to happen. You know, it's kind of cheating. It's like, well, of course you know what's going to happen. And like yeah. So there's, also, the whole, like, twist villain thing, I've never been a big fan. Like, sorry, I'm fine, I love a good twist villain, but it's not a very, like, Tolkien thing in my mind. The twist villain is like a very Marvel, Disney, Star Wars type thing at the moment, you know, like it became really popular with the first Frozen film, you know, and like the typical good guy being the villain of the series. But you know, I would have much preferred a story where Anatar comes to Eregion and he's just like, I know from this, I would prefer that I knew from the start he was Sauron, but like the average viewer didn't. And the average viewer just thought he was like trying to help, you know, heal the lands and whatever. And then of course figures out what he is. Like that's what I would have preferred, you know, like it's just the straightforward story. Because like one of the things, Sauron was a twist villain from the Free People's point of view. Was he? I mean, he was kind of bad, and then, like, I mean, it was a twist that Anatar was Sauron, because they didn't know he was Sauron, but, like, once everyone knew he was Sauron, they were kind of like, yeah, I mean, he's bad. Yeah, that line and it goes, how'd you become king of the Southlands? I literally never told you I wasn't. I told you I got it off a dead guy. Like, I've been completely honest here. You are the only one who came up with this. So... No, because, like, Sauron is meant to be Sauron is meant to be a twist villain. What I'm saying is that I would have preferred that I knew he was because I've read the books, you know? It's like the twist that Dumbledore dies. If you've read the books, you know it's coming. It's still a twist to everyone who hasn't read the books. But I would have preferred that it's just, you know, this Anatar character who turns up. Yeah. I would have preferred they just played it straight there. And then we'd also just get so much more time with Celebrimbor and the Forge, because like we've had barely any time with Eregion. Like, one of the weird things about this series is that, like, even though there is so much, like, actual lore stuff in the fringes of the story, it's all on the fringes, and all of the meat of the story is the stuff that Amazon has made up. Which is just a very... You mentioned Star Wars as having twist villains. Star Wars has literally never had a twist villain since 1977. I swear, look, I gotta be honest, I don't care about Star Wars, that's not my thing, but I swear, like, some of the TV series have had, like, twist villains. Wasn't, like, Daenerys' character a twist villain in the Han Solo film? And, the TV series with, like, Obi-Wan had, like, twist villain? I don't know, I don't care. You know what I'm talking about. It's just like that's a common modern trope in stuff. Yeah, so it's really weird that like the series, even though it has like all of this like Celebrimbor forging the rings on the fringe, like that is all on the fringe. It's all on the outside and not in the middle. You know, the meat of the story is Galadriel going to Numenor and Numenor going to the Southlands and Adar. So I'm just very, it's just an odd decision. Like, so much of the story for me comes down to, I don't know why you did it like this. Like, why tell the story like this? Um I yeah, I so yeah, I don't I would have, so the 8th episode is like pretty much the story that people wanted, pretty much. Like, this, the 8th episode is the story that people wanted to have told, I think, for the most part. Oh, people talking about the song at the end, the 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. Tell me, guys, what did you think of that song? Because my partner and I heard that song, we're going, wow, that is an awful rendition of that poem. Like, that was not a good, like, I don't know who told someone to do that. It sounded like one of those weird improv sessions in a Pink Floyd song. Yeah, it's it was not good. It's clear that, like, they were going for kind of that Peter Jackson song at the end of each, film. Like, I mean, which is totally fine. I love the concept. In fact, I wish more films did it. Because I think it's really, really cool. But that was not it. That was not a good song. Yeah. I was just listening to it. It was yeah. So episode 8 was basically the story that where it should have started. And of course, it's easy to be like, oh, hey, this is a 5-season story. This is just season 1, and now they're going to move into the actual meat of the story. But it is very odd that is the way that they even did the first season. I don't know why. I don't know why it was done like that. And so, secondly, we have the Harfoot story, where the cultists come along and basically announce that he is Sauron. And I was looking at the start of the episode, and I'm going, there's no way he's Sauron. That is not how they're doing the Sauron reveal. It was clearly, again, it's a bait and switch, which is a very modern trope, where, like, they trick you into thinking that, this character's the villain to try and make you not think it's like that, which is, in my opinion, not a very Tolkien decision to make. Yeah. I talked about the Balrog. Talked about the Balrog story, and I'm not about how I don't like the Balrog reveal. It felt really wasted. Yeah. So that's, what have I got? My goodness. They are not cultists. They are the other Astari. They are not the other Astari. They were like Umaya. They were not the other Astari. Like, they were clearly Umaya. Like I'm 90% sure, or like some kind of dark spirit of some kind. Yeah. So Halbrand and Galadriel ends up confronting Halbrand in this episode, and with this scroll, which very easily proves that there is no King of the Southlands. And King of the Southlands. And then okay, this is one thing I actually did really like in this episode, is that Sauron historically has always been portrayed as like a guy on the battlefield, right? He's a guy with a huge army. He is a guy with a lot of martial power, power of the flesh, swinging a mace and stuff like that. When in reality, in the lore, he's a magician. He's a guy who's an incredibly powerful mind, who can, take over other people's minds in that sort of sense. And so I liked that when they did reveal Saruman, they went inside Galadriel's mind with visions and stuff like that, rather than him like just having a fight with her, which they very well could have done, you know. Also, thank you, Finthras, for the $5. It's very kind. Remember when Peter Jackson indirectly created Ed Sheeran's One Good Song? I have trash music tastes, and admittedly, I don't like a huge number of Ed Sheeran songs, but I do like that like real casual indie music type stuff. So Icy Fire, I remember not liking it when it first came out. I remember listening to it and going, this doesn't feel like Tolkien to me, this feels like a pop song, I don't like it. But I think I grew to like it over time. So there's and if you do want questions answered, feel free to give me money. You don't have to though. I'm just here to talk. Hashtag grind set. So Galadriel confronts Hellbrand and is like, who are you and stuff like that, and then he goes, you know, don't you believe that I can repent? Now, that is another interesting element, which is that, you know, Tolkien, I won't spend too much time on this, but the idea of repentance and everyone being redeemable really does nicely build into kind of the to the Catholic themes that Tolkien often dealt with. And so I liked that they approached that, and I have talked before about how Sauron did have a repentant phase, and so playing with that concept is really interesting. Another thing that they finally, in the Numenor section, referenced the kind of jealousy of men living, of not being able to live forever, jealousy of elves, and the obsession with death. That finally came up in episode 8. So yeah, so they have that, and then Hellbrand disappears, basically. He's gone. Which throws my brain a little bit, because is that Hellbrand? Is that Sauron done at Eregion? Like, is that Sauron done at Eregion? Is that Sauron's final participation in the creation of the rings? There's like a slight suggestion that Celebrimbor would have him come back. Again, in the lore, Sauron stayed around to forge with Celebrimbor a ton of rings, and then after he leaves, Celebrimbor makes the 3. We saw the 3 being made in this story. But I'm really struggling because Elrond clearly knows who he is, or at least has figured out that he's very much not okay. Galadriel certainly knows. So, I mean, there's a point at which I'm kind of like, it looks like he's about to go off and create the One Ring in Mordor without the rest of the rings. He literally taught Celebrimbor what an alloy was, which is... No, I mean, obviously Celebrimbor knew what an alloy was, but he gave information about how to do it. I don't get that. I was like watching this and I was like, okay, Sauron is in Eregion now. Clearly, by the way, contrived that he was wounded and so had to go to Eregion, and then he's totally fine. Like, that was basically just an excuse to get Hellbrand to Eregion. And him being King of the Southlands never amounted to much because it's just the place is destroyed. Yeah. It's so... Yeah, so I was under the impression, watching this whole time, I was like, okay, so Sauron's going to come to Eregion and then we're going to get a whole season there, or something like that, right? Because we've barely seen Eregion. We've barely seen the kind of stuff like that. I have to imagine that Sauron or Hellbrand is going to somehow come back to Eregion and Celebrimbor's going to, like, work with him in secret, which could could work. Celebrimbor has clearly indicated that like he would maybe do it, but I mean, once you're told that he's Sauron, it's kind of like, would you even then? Yeah. Also, people in the chat doing the whole like people destroying franchises stuff. Look, I don't care. That's not my lens. All right. I'm not going down that path. Not talking about that. And the people who call like Galadriel Guy Ladriel, it's freaking petty and childish. God. Yeah, no, totally not me. The series is bad, but those people are childish and petty. So yeah, I don't like what they've done at all, really. It's so permeated by this constant sense of why do it like this, you know? So Sauron's injury was "'tis but a flesh wound." Yeah, it's very much the case. Also, actually, I gotta look something up. Let's just go. I gotta look something up. Give me a second. Because there were 3 writers on this final episode. And yeah, now I'm looking at this. There were 3 writers. There was Jennifer Hutchinson, and then J.D. Payne, and whatever the other guy was. But yeah, so that's odd. But Game of Thrones, pretty much every single episode was written by either one writer or the 2 writers together, which, in my mind, is a much better decision. And the only reason I bring that up is because too many cooks spoil the broth. And I've seen TV series where you know, there's so many writers all trying to write the same season, and yeah, but I'm looking at I'm looking at this here. Writers, first episode 2, second episode 1, third episode by 2 other people. So that's 2 other people. So we've got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 writers. Episode 4, 6 writers, but that's got 3 writers in total. Episode 5, 1 writer, but again, no, not a new one. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then episode 6 had 4 writers, including a new writer. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. We got 7 writers in total for the first 8 episodes. For the 8 episodes of Rings of Power, and about half of them have 3 writers on any individual episode. That is, look, I don't know what it's like to make a TV series like this, but I would not write, you know, books written with multiple authors don't tend to work that well, and I tend to think, why does an episode need a different writer? An episode doesn't need a different writer. What I'm saying is that, like, too many cooks often spoil the broth, and having too many writers, like having too many producers involved in any given thing, often waters everything down because the writers are having to, you know, like compromise and everything like that. Yeah. So so yeah, I'm I mean that'll be part of the reason the script is bad. There's a whole bunch of little elements that were just bad. I mean, look, it is nice that Galadriel did have some element of a character arc. The show has 15 to 20 producers. I don't know what's normal. I gotta be honest. I don't actually know what's normal in a like, it's a massive production. Producer just means you're like involved. Like George R. R. Martin is a producer, but he doesn't have any on House of the Dragon, but he doesn't really have any. Hang on, let's go. Can I see how many producers there are? Producers. How many producers were there? I can't see how many producers there were on the first season of Game of Thrones. It doesn't tell me. How many producers Game of Thrones? Yeah, so like, I mean, there's a ton of producers on Game of Thrones as well in like its early seasons. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, there's 8. I don't know. I don't really know what the impact of having that many producers is. I don't really know. But, yeah. The show is not that good. What else have I got down here? I mean, like, if I was to redo the show, right? And I'm just kind of coming up with this off the top of my head. I'd have basically the story. I don't really mind the whole time compression thing. I don't mind compressing the timeline. In fact, I'd probably say it's pretty necessary because adapting something that takes place over 2,000 years, if you want it to have any sort of wide appeal, has to have consistent characters, basically, or at least some sort of consistent through point in a way that the second age is not particularly flexible with if you want to tell the story of Numenor. So you'd have to compress it where started off where Numenor is kind of in this really tense position, you know, between the faithful and the King's men, and then also parallel that with the forging of the rings, and do a storyline where Numenor is oppressing Harad because they go and colonize Harad. And if you want to do a story where, you know, that explores how Run and Harad were not always evil, which I think they wanted to do, then have it so that Harad is being oppressed by Numenor and they've got kind of like a almost revolutionary storyline, right? Whatever. Or exploring the relationship with that Numenorian oppression, and you've got kind of that side of it. Yeah, that's the thing though, is that Numenorians lived like 300 years. Like, that's not a small period of time. If you wanted to tell the story over 3 generations, you know, you could do that pretty easily. I don't really know, you know. But I would have that Harad storyline to join in with the Numenor storyline, and then I'd have the Rings storyline, which then feeds into kind of a war between the elves and Sauron, and then Numenor. Tipping over my pile of books. I have a pile of books next to me at all times. Yeah, and then you've got the dropping my phone. Damn it. And then you've got the War of the Elves and Sauron, which, of course, Numenorians, you'd probably have to be a little bit flexible with the lore of like how involved the Numenorians are, because in the lore, like the Numenorians only show up at like the very end, like 2 times or something, and you can probably have them be a bit more involved than that, you know. They should have used the Tolkien critique of Numenor as an imperial state. That's the thing, is that Numenor is like an oppressive place. It is not. They're an elitist, like they're elitist, you know, terrible people who think they're awesome, you know, and they don't really do anything with that at all. These people feel so mediocre when you watch them going, you know, the elves are going to take our jobs. You look at them and you go, you're a bunch of dim-witted idiots, you know, pretty much. Like, there's one elf that arrives on your shore and suddenly you think that all these people are going to take your jobs. Like, it's so dumb. It's a bad idea to compress the timeline if you have long-living characters. I mean, yeah, but not all of the characters are long-living, you know. I think you have to be flexible with the length of Second Age if you want to adapt it. You can still represent the themes that are important to long lives and aging, without necessarily stretching it to the thousands of years that it is. Oh, thank you, Morrigan, for the $20. It's very kind of you. You said, problem is, all these shows are made with the intention to subvert from the themes of the source material to audience expectations to the classic... Problem is, all these shows are made with the intention to subvert from the themes of the source material to audience expectations to classic, satisfying tropes about heroism. Game of Thrones succeeded because it's inherently subversive. I'm not sure I agree with that. In a sense, like, I do agree that there are tropes in modern films where subverting expectations or pulling off twists is... Why is my face so hot? Oh my gosh. Is something more of a priority nowadays, or at least trying to trick the audience into believing things shows up a lot more, I feel like. You know. But I don't think that, like... I don't think that the Rings of Power was necessarily, like, trying to undermine, like, heroism, you know, in that, like trying to take away heroism in Tolkien's world. Like, that I didn't read that really into it. Like, Galadriel's kind of, you know, genocidal tendencies are portrayed to be a bad thing. Of course, you do also have, like, Halbrand, who is kind of a traditional hero arc, being the villain. So maybe you're right. I don't know. I have to think about this a bit more. There is an element where it's kind of like... I don't think they necessarily care about the source material as much. They're trying to kind of be like, alright, let's take the source material and then let's see what we can do with it to make it more interesting in some way. I don't like that approach very much. I mean, I'm kind of like, alright, if you want to tell the story, tell the story. And, like, the Second Age obviously needs expansion. Like, there's just no way getting around it. We've got, like, very, very little detail on what happens in the Second Age. So you've got to add stuff in. But, like, they didn't need to add this stuff in. Like, the whole Southland storyline is just such a bizarre contrivance out of the story of the Second Age. It's like you could take the entire story of the Southlands, and if you're looking at it in the grand scheme of things of like, they are telling the story of the Second Age, or let's take that as a baseline, then what does the Southlands in the story kind of do? Which is where it was all pining towards. Does it prove that Numenor is, like, doing stuff, you know? And it's like, well, their story is about their decline, and Alf-Aravzone's like, hey, we can use this to get favors from the king of the Southlands, but the Southlands is gone. It's Mordor now. The Halbrand is not being its king, you know? Or maybe he will be. I don't really know. I'm really hot on the face. This is not very pleasant. And then Numenor already has its colonies, and we could explore it in other ways. This didn't meaningfully explore Numenor's story very much, in my opinion. And then what about the Rings of Power and Sauron? Well, I mean, Halbrand had very little of anything of an idea of like what he wanted to do until he turned up at Eregion, you know, with this idea to kind of like make the story, make the lands better and heal the lands, but heal the lands by controlling them. But you could do all of that without the Southland storyline. If it basically comes down to they wanted to... I can see the Southlands being a justification for the Numenorians becoming more militaristic as we go. I mean, a justification. I mean, in the lore by this point, they're already really militarized, but they also have colonies already. They mention that in the 7th episode that they already have colonies along Middle Earth, so we can presume that they have already militarized. I would say by this point. Yeah. So that's so I for all of the the Southlands is just one village. That is my favorite meme. I hope everybody. I hope Hellbrand enjoys being king over the two villages of the Southlands, all 30 people. Yeah, Farazan seems like he's already a militant isolationist. Yeah, there's a little bit like that, but we've had very, very little time with our Farazan. He's had like a few scenes. So yeah, if they wanted to just like show the creation of Mordor, that to me is just like a really weak justification. They had colonies, as they say. What made them lose? Did they say they had colonies? I don't really know. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like, this episode, again, was the story I think people wanted to tell, and I hope that that's not the end of Sauron in Eregion, because that, to me, is, like, so much a core point of the story. So, alright, let's talk about Galadriel, though. Oh, actually, one second, before I do. Mighty Mulatto, $5, thank you very much. Awful, as in it was predictable. I'm really hoping Wardreg is actually Sauron. Adar has to be made a martyr for the orcs at this point. Yeah, I mean, I guess. Can you imagine Sauron turning up and the orcs are just like, oh, you know, I'm really sorry. Hey, Dad. It's like Dad coming home when you've like screwed up everything else, and he's like, you tried to kill me, and like, it wasn't me. It was that guy. It was that guy over there. I'm just gonna go this way. Yeah. So it's so Galadriel. Galadriel, I think people have been a bit obtuse about Galadriel. Her character arc is very clearly meant to be from very dark tendencies towards giving those up and trying something better. Like, I mean, if that is clearly the arc in the story. I mean, say what you will about giving her those dark tendencies in the first place, but I mean, I think it's pretty inignorable that the whole her giving up the blade, the symbol of her pursuing vengeance in the final episode, melting it down into the rings as a protective measure, which has its own complications, is like, I mean, I think like it's very clearly her meant to be that portraying those dark tendencies as bad, and we have very little an indication of what she was really like in the Second Age. We get like a few vague quotes, so I don't really mind what they did with Galadriel all that much. There are parts in the story, especially in the earlier episodes, where her anger is really petty and childish, and that's really frustrating, because if you're going to do this anger storyline, you know, you've got to do it in a way that's like her pain is coming out in ways that she hurts other people, you know, that are, but they don't do it in a particularly interesting way. It's just her being really annoying, you know, sometimes. But then there are moments where her rage does come out in kind of like the where it kind of comes out in her, you know, bursting out at people for not pursuing the evil or whatever, and that's a lot more understandable. But yeah, so I when I think about the bad things that Rings of Power has done, Galadriel's character is not the thing that stands out to me the most. There are changes to her character, but not not the element that not that kind of element, because I don't mind the idea of her being traumatized after the the war against Melkor, and then going into Dark Place and then finding her way to becoming the character that we know. That doesn't really bother me, provided that's the direction that they're going and they do that well, which at the moment I don't think they have done very well. Matt Rasp, thank you very much for the $10 or the $9.99. I'm a Tolkien nerd, but I don't know how people didn't think a lot of this was awesome, but I also knew this wouldn't be a word-for-word copy due to the greedy Tolkien estate. Well, the Tolkien estate, from what I know, and I don't know that much, to be perfectly honest, was involved in this pretty heavily. I don't know to what degree. It's almost certain that Christopher Tolkien wouldn't have allowed it in the way that it did, but he's dead now, so yeah. I don't know how people didn't think a lot of this was awesome. I mean, people have a complicated relationship with Tolkien's works. Tolkien there's an uncommon amount of loyalty to Tolkien's vision, specifically his vision for his characters. I don't think I've ever seen another, nerd community coalesce around the author's vision as concretely as Tolkien's. I'm very much a part of that. Tolkien's intentions with his story are very, very precious to me and mean a lot. More than most other stories, and I don't necessarily know why. I think it's because there's just so much meaning behind it, that so much of the story is several layers deep. So much of the story is in those layers that Tolkien elaborates on, and so seeing those disrespected, seeing those undermined, seeing those ignored, is kind of, it makes you hate the piece pretty much. And it doesn't matter how much of a spectacle it might be. Spectacle might be, you don't like the fact that it is taking these things and corrupting it in a way, And then secondly, I don't think that a lot of the story was done particularly well. Like the whole Southlands story, the whole story really pins on you caring about the Southlands. It pins on you caring about Theo and Bronwyn and on the tension in Númenor. But I was not sold on the tension in Númenor. Tarmariel's decision to go and help the Southlands didn't mean anything to me. Halbrand's supposed arc of being the king did not work for me. The whole story in the Southlands didn't matter to me. I don't care about these characters at all, really. When there was worries about Bronwyn being dead, I was just like, oh, I hope Bronwyn's dead, because at least that'd be more interesting for Theo's character. Theo I just found frustrating the whole time. Yeah, so there's that. I think that's that. Mighty Mulatto, $5. Thank you very much. Adar's killing will be pinned on Isildur. Cause. Oh yeah, what the hell happened to Isildur? He did not turn up in this episode. I suppose he's going to be coming back in episode 1 of season 2. Adar's killing will be pinned on Isildur, causing the orcs to go all Oath of Fëanor. I don't know. Will that be the case? Would they not pin it on Galadriel? I don't know. Can you at least accept her actor is bland and stage direction is aimless? I don't know if her actor is bland. Is her actor bland? I don't think her actor was bland. What do you mean by bland? What does that even mean? yeah. So I'm not saying that Galadriel's character was done necessarily well, but I think that people have probably seen flaws where there aren't necessarily flaws. Um, and I think they have hyperfixated on that element of the show when the more critical flaws of the show are in other places. Um, and there's a bunch of socio-cultural reasons for that, you know? Um, I don't find her character hugely compelling, you know, overall. Um, but I think that the story is very flawed, but those flaws mostly come out in other places in the story for me. Matt Rasp gave me $2. Thank you very much. Bezos has paid billions for bullet points. Yeah, that is basically the case. Um, yeah, he paid a lot of money for very little, and they didn't even do anything with it. It's so bizarre. That is the thing, right? Is that if they wanted to tell the story, but they wanted to tell their own... If they wanted to... I mean, look. They wanted to tell their own story. I think that's pretty clear. But they wanted it to do well. So they wanted to attach the Lord of the Rings name to it. So they bought the Lord of the Rings name, and then they told a different story, and then slapped that name on it for money. I do think that is the case of it. And, I mean, you can say... I think people who are saying, like, there's no love and passion put into this, like, there are hundreds of people that worked on shows like these who I'm sure are very passionate about their jobs, who love the art of it, right? But I think that on a producer level, on a Bezos level, on a money level, on an Amazon Prime level, which is where these decisions are made, this was them just wanting to buy a big series name and hopefully buy their way into the streaming market. For $1 billion, which is really funny when the series is nowhere near as good as The Expanse or The Boys, which are a lot cheaper for them, you know. So, yeah. That's the thing, right? I mean, I don't know where they're going to go with season 2. I don't know where they're going to go. It certainly looks like Hellbrand is going to go forge the One Ring, which would be very odd because the other rings have not been forged yet. Yeah. Okay, guys, in the chat, give me a rating out of 10. I want to see what the kind of average number is. And yeah, I would like to see that. Yeah, the whole Hobbit section reeks of meddling by higher-ups to get something recognizable, but they cut a lot of stuff time because of it. That is very much my feeling as well. I was watching this and I was going, why are the Harfoots in this? You know, okay, 5, 1, 3, 1, 1, 4, 4, 5, 5, 2, 4, 5, 3, 4, 3, 2, 4, 9, 3, 3, 3, 5, 7, 4, 1, 4, 3, 5, 6, 1, 4, 7, 2, 3. Okay, so the average seems to be around probably 3, I'd say. Yeah. We should do a rating out of 5. 10 is super loose for everybody. I don't know. Yeah, so it's... I think for me, it'd probably come in at around that kind of 3, 4 mark. If you take 5 as like an average show that is competent, then it would be a 3 for me. I think that the dwarf storyline is kind of fun. Kind of sucks that Durin and Elrond like barely played a part in the final episode when they're the best part of the series. Yeah. So There does seem to be some people who are going, Matt Rasp, thank you for the other $20. That's very kind of you. No, what I when I said that, I mean Tolkien estate is unreasonable. They would have loved to have the full material, but the richest man in the world couldn't get the full rights. Our wet dreams would never be possible. Yeah, I mean the Tolkien estate is particularly protective of its rights to material in the Tolkien world. I'm sure there's a bunch of internal politics around that. I don't think the Silmarillion was on the table. I'm pretty sure that Amazon probably asked for the rights to the Silmarillion, and I am 90% sure that the Tolkien estate just refused. But I mean, I think at that point, the Tolkien estate should reconsider, should reconsider the story that they want to tell, right? Like, if they feel like they're going, well, I don't know, I feel like we're not getting the material that we need. It's like, well, tell a different story, I can't believe they spent this much money and they couldn't get a good story together. I'm not a Tolkien fan, but so mystified why every plot line was happening. Everything was so disconnected. It's very true. It's very true. The whole piece feels very mediocre, very fragmented, very disconnected. I mean, for the most expensive, I mean, for a lot of people, the bottom line is going to be for the most expensive show ever made. It's bizarre how very flat it is, I think in being overprotective, the Tolkien estate makes it worse for any future adaptations because it does greatly limit the story people could tell. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any strong opinions about that. I think I'd have to think a bit more about it. Potentially. Yeah, it's I think that the storylines for me, like the Harfoots, the Harfoot story to me felt like Amazon insisting that they needed something familiar. And what's the one thing everyone knows from Middle Earth? It's hobbits. It's the Shire, So they decided that there had to be hobbits in there somewhere, right? There just had to be hobbits. That is basically the reason I feel like they were probably included, because they clearly don't link in with any other story, and I don't know how they even could. This episode ended with Nori and one of the blue wizards going off towards Run, country in the east. And their story is going to take place in the east, which means they might have something to do with Sauron in the future. Again, that is a story that Tolkien has 3 lines on. He says basically the blue wizards went into the east, got corrupted, and that's the end of it. He's written very, very little about Run. So this gives a lot of room for them to kind of come up with whatever story they want. Moneybags McGee. Oh, hi, Jeff Bezos. I didn't realize you were in the chat. I feel bad for Bear McCreary. Such good music wasted on flat writing. Absolutely. Bear McCreary's work, and I don't care what anyone says, Bear McCreary's soundtrack has been phenomenal. He has done a fantastic job of managing to managing to be familiar, but also inventive. He did a fantastic job. It's too bad that his that his score was basically wasted. Yeah. So people saying that the Lord of the Rings cavalry charge was good. Again, I want to repeat, I didn't care for episode 6 very much. I don't think that the battle scene was that particularly good. Like, I don't know. I feel like so many reviewers are just wowed by it being a big budget thing. That, like, because it's got so many extras and so many real world props and so many visual effects, that it looks good. And then there's kind of like the name of, that it's got the name Lord of the Rings attached to it. Yeah, no, not really good. But seriously, guys, go listen to Bear McCreary's music. It is actually fantastic. He's a brilliant composer. Tim, would you say that shows and movies are in a dark age, or is that an exaggeration? People who use the phrase, here's why modern movies suck, or things like that, are basically illiterate. They're the sort of people who only watch Disney, Star Wars, and stuff that is extremely mainstream, and then think that... Oh, am I live now? Am I live again? Or is that frozen? Tell me, guys, am I live? I'm back? I'm back? Okay. Good. Yeah. So, like, there is this kernel of people online, and they're particularly present on YouTube, where they basically only comment on Marvel and Disney and Star Wars. And that is basically their entire measure for what counts as either a good film or a bad film, or a good TV series or a bad TV series. And when they go, like, here's how you do this well, their entire reference will be the 1997 Star Wars film for how to do stuff. I don't know when Star Wars came out. And I find this very frustrating because people seem to think, and they're the sort of people who will, like, take the hero's journey and be like, this is how you do a good story. And it's like, that's not what the hero's journey is about. That is not what it's even for. Yeah, I'm not naming names. I'm not naming names. So, yeah, so, like, the thing is that, like, if you scratch just a little bit beneath the surface, you can see that there's amazing stuff. Thank you for correcting me on the dates that Star Wars came out. Yeah, Everything Everywhere All at Once came out literally this year. Top Gun Maverick, that was fun. There's tons of modern stuff coming out. That is a different thing to that is a very different critique to like the modern film industry is saturated with remakes and live. Oh my god, stop the freaking live action remakes. Kill me. That's a very different thing, because that is very much a problem. Yeah. I know, I need to be careful. I am not calling out anyone in particular. So I am not addressing this to anyone specifically. But it is frustrating. Yeah, no, not a big... That's definitely a problem. And also that there's just a lot of films which are just very, very average and forced, and like pushed along way too quickly. And like a symptom of that is the visual effects industry. Is that like the visual effects industry is like imploding right now. I have a friend who works in that industry, and she talks to me about how that there's like a whole bunch of how awful companies like Marvel and stuff are to work with. And so when we think about, well, why does She-Hulk look that terrible? Because she does. The animation in that is hilariously bad. It's because, as a symptom of these stranglehold grips that these companies have on the industry as a whole, these the sort of stuff is breaking down. Ugh. So yeah, there's that element. They disrespect animation with live action remakes. Yeah, although, I mean, Western animation is seeing a bit of a renaissance at the moment. We just got announced that War of the Rohirrim series, which, anime or something like that. Arcane came out, Castlevania. Netflix's Love, Death and Robots has been a real interesting element. Yeah, so there's that element. For the record, the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker was a terrible film. Like, mind-bogglingly bad. Wolfwalkers was great. There is a bunch of really interesting stuff in Western animation. Yeah. I have not seen, and then like Edge Runners just came out recently, and I have been listening to the soundtrack to that. I haven't actually seen the series, but it came into my circles. Yeah. And I mean, the streaming landscape has changed how we make stuff entirely. Somehow Sauron returned. Oh, that's so funny. Somehow Palpatine returned. So but I mean, Rings of Power reeks of to me it reeks of a corporation trying to produce something for just a bit of money to buy into the streaming market. It's kind of that sense that, like, they could have made something else and they made this, purely for name recognition. Like, you could take most of the story beats in season 1 and put them entirely in a different IP, and people probably wouldn't know that people probably wouldn't think that much about it being a rip-off Lord of the Rings. Like, that's how different it is, Yeah, Bezos said, bring me the next Game of Thrones. I mean, that's it. For the record, guys, I am going to do an autopsy on the series. It's going to be a long video, and I'm going to talk about why the series is not very good, but I'm also going to talk about the audience response to it, because I find it a really interesting example of like how communities engage with their with stuff being made in their in what they're interested in, because we're in a really interesting age where I think that people feel a stronger sense of ownership than they have in the past, in a way. Welcome to the new people. Kind of like Man Carrying Things, Wheel of Time, hour-long critique. Yes, that is a weirdly specific reference for you to get, but that is kind of, I mean, I know Jake, and yeah, I kind of got the idea from him. It's it's what did I say? Yeah, I want to look at the relationship between kind of fandoms and the materials that are made in their stuff, because I think I do think that people are more critical than they have been in the past. I think that's potentially true. But I think people also feel a much stronger sense of ownership. But also, there is kind of this throw everything at the wall. Throw everything at the wall approach that we've kind of got at the moment. You know, like with Star Wars, right? Like, Disney doesn't have as much invested in making every single thing work perfectly. It's not like a super creative vision in the same way, because they're making so many things that they're more testing which is going to work. And then they stick with that, and then they go with that, you know. So there's that element. Yeah. But there's also just like a bunch of corporate decisions in Rings of Power that are really bizarre. Like, I do think that you know, I think it's pretty clear that they wanted to include more representation in Tolkien's world. And you know, when you look at you know, race is very much a thing in Tolkien's world, and that's fine. Race is a thing in a ton of fictional worlds. I think it's a very interesting thing to world build with. But it is a little bit strange that they decided to go with this very milquetoast version of representation, where like instead of exploring race, they sort of just ignore it in a way, which I want to contrast that with like House of the Dragon, which face similar critiques, where they're kind of like, well, this you know, we want to include more representation, and so they go, all right, how can we? Well, race is very much a thing in this world as well. How do we work this in? And like Corlys Velaryon, his like mother was from the I don't know Westeros lore as well. It's from Sakorios. No, that's the south area. There's like a south island. Yeah, I mean the Velaryon house is just done really, really well. Sothorios, there you go. Thank you very much. So, but at the same time, I think, so one of the things that's really interesting about, that I do want to talk about, it's kind of a hot take, isn't it? I think I might save that for the video. Yeah, so there's no real passion behind that decision. Yeah, that's what I sort of get as well. It feels like a very corporate decision for how you're gonna do it. It's and like, so one other thing with like Rings of Power and Arondir. Arondir is a dark-skinned elf, and he's actually one of the best elven characters in the series. My hope is that like they made like Mirkwood elves look different or something like that, and that he's maybe from there or something like that. I don't really know. Samuel Kurek, if you could change one thing in the show, thank you very much for the $10. What do you think you would change to make the best impact on Primus story? Ugh, that's such a hard decision. I don't even know where to start. I don't know. I don't know what I would do. Which, I mean, I would probably, I don't know what I would probably do. I think I would probably make the story, I think I would probably make it so that Numenor and, I think I would, I think I would probably make the story start off with Anatar. I would make more of the story being about Anatar, Sauron coming to Eregion, and the kind of corruption of Celebrimbor. Probably that would probably be the main change that I would make. The other one being, I would make Numenor's story be about this sort of almost civil war between the faithful and the Kingsmen, and like explore their immortality stuff, because that's the most compelling story in the Second Age. Yeah, I don't know. Someone else. Yeah. So it's a lot of marginalized people like this discriminationless approach because it helps to cope with real life discrimination, escapism sorts. You know what? That's fair. I don't mind that. I don't want to like, you know, I don't want to say what marginalized people necessarily believe or anything like that, or what they want. You know, I mean, as with every group, any marginalized groups are complicated and have a diverse array of opinions, and trying to synthesize that down into kind of, you know, the right representation decisions is really, really hard. So it's yeah. But I want to discuss all of that. I want to discuss all of that more in, like, actually, Numenor is one really interesting example with, like, representation, is because they're a colonial empire. You could definitely make the case that they're a lot more multicultural. That's very much true. Yeah. Robert Petit, the show. Thank you for the $10. The show hasn't been that great, but the finale was alright. As a bit of a Tolkien added, the show to me was like based on the true story biopic similar to 300 Relates. Yeah, it's very much that sort of thing. I think at the moment it feels like a story inspired by Tolkien more than an adaptation of his works. It's yeah, it does feel like that, right? It feels like it's inspired by. Again, I said this at the start. I said that it's really odd that they have this, like, border of here is the lore, and then everything that's in the middle is stuff they made up. But they didn't need to do it that way, and it's very puzzling. It's very puzzling. I don't think the showrunners were ready for this level of project. They struggled to capture the drama this was capable of. That is my impression too. I mean, actually, I have to be curious. What did the Game of Thrones writers, David blah blah blah, D&B, what did they do beforehand? All right, so they did a bunch of. Oh, they did Troy, The Kite Runner, X-Men Origins, Wolverine. Okay, I mean, they did a bunch of stuff at least, but their first television show was admittedly that. Yeah, they were also pretty new. Apparently they were just better when they were adapting. Yeah, I'm not gonna call. I think I've seen a lot of people call, like, the writers and the creators and stuff like that, like, actively malicious, and I feel like these things are always way more complicated than that. It's fun. What's the old quote? Do not attribute to malice what you can probably attribute to stupidity. Now, I don't like to say that they're all dumb. I just mean that it's far more likely that running a show of this magnitude, running a project of this amount of stakes for the company, for themselves, with this many people, this many productions, like, there's a reason it's so hard, and it's far more likely that the show is very underwhelming because they were just not equipped to handle that, rather than because they're like evil or like they hate them at source material. Like that's, you know, it sort of thing. You know, I mean, do you guys agree with that? Assume incompetence, run the mills. Yeah. So, is that? Do you guys feel like that's a fair take? You know, I am very, yeah. It's that writing is complicated thing. You know, like put it this way, I I have no like, and it's not just writing, right? These things, when you're running a project like this, it is not just writing. It is managing the production of the story. I'm sure they were heavily involved in so many elements, and they're not necessarily equipped to do that. Mighty Mulatto, $5. Thank you very much. You've given me money. That is very kind. To the uninitiated, season 1 is just fine. Season 2, I think, is going the way you're saying. It'll be less bound and have more creative freedom. Yes. Yeah, I mean, by the looks of it, it'll have more creative freedom. I mean, I don't know where they are in the timeline exactly, where they're going with these stories. Whether having more creative freedom is a good thing, I don't know, because the stories where they wrote this stuff that's like pretty, you know, everything, like it feels like most of what they wrote that is not in the story was just not very good. So I don't know where they're going with that. Yeah. They, yeah, there have been stuff where they, yeah, I'll talk about that in the video. They have, I think that their PR has been pretty bad at times. Pretty cringe, pretty bad. Not a good start for many people. Yeah. It's pretty cringe what they have said at times. But I gotta be honest, I have not kept up with what the creators have said, and I don't know what the actors have said. I'm not particularly interested in the news reports of that sort of thing. It's just not in my realm of interest. Michael Tucker, thank you very much for the $10. That's very kind of you. You guys have given me so much money. You do not need to. I'm just here to talk. I gave up after episode 3. That is fine. No one's obligated to watch. No one's obligated to watch. That is totally fair. How do you balance unified vision with multiple people to watch for pitfalls before you consider all the people that wanted a say and had enough power to get one? Yeah, I don't know. It's hard, right? Like, how do you do that? I don't know. It is not easy. Not easy at all. So, why are we talking about the Persians? People in the chat are talking about the Persians and the Greeks. I am not following how that came up. Yeah, it's but yeah, Rings of Power. Also, if you guys have any questions about like other things, feel free to put those in the chat because I will try to answer them. What other thoughts do I have? 6 Days of Ruining. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of Gil Galad at one point told Celebrimbor to like disband the city. I'm like, what? You just want people to like abandon the entirety of Eregia? See, the Second Age is is really about a bunch of kingdoms rising and then falling. It's about Numenor going to its greatest height and then dying. It's about Eregion going to its greatest height and then dying. It is about it's sort of the start and the end of Linden, but it's also, it's also about kind of the formations of kingdoms. So it's interesting to me that they haven't really leaned into that very hard. I found it really weird how little we see of Eregion, and the lack of Celebrimbor when he's such a core character. House of the Dragon, though, is fantastic. No, it was your fault with the 300 comparison. Ah, right. How's your face temperature? I probably look really flush, don't I? You can see the redness in my cheeks. I get really hot when I'm on camera. It's not great. It's, why does the writing seem like everyone's last concern? Does it seem like everyone? Do you mean like everyone in the audience or everyone in the production? I don't know who, I don't think it was the last concern. I just don't think it was very good. I think my bet is they were very concerned with the writing and they just didn't manage it. Here's my bet, okay? Here's my bet. Bunch of producers, bunch of writers all sitting down at the table, okay? And they go, all right, here are the stories we have for 5 seasons. We're going to make 5 seasons. Okay, great. We're going to split it into Khazad-dûm and the elves, Numenor and Galadriel, the Southlands, and then one of the producers from Amazon says, and we need the Half-Wits, we need hobbits, because people like hobbits. And so the writers at this point go, oh, okay, 4 storylines, I can do 4 storylines. And they put a lot of work into making, into making, this, that they plan it all out and they start production and whatever. But then when they actually get to writing everything, it looks better on paper than it is in practice. That's my bet, all right? They write it all out and they think this looks good on paper, and then they film it and it's just not very good. That's my bet. And then of course they don't have the time or whatever. Yeah, you don't fail this hard if you care about it with that much money. You just don't. I don't agree with that take. It doesn't matter how much money you have if you're not equipped, and by equipped I mean skill equipped to do the story like this. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how much you care about it. Caring about a story does not make you good at writing it, okay? And having money does not make you good at telling a story. Avatar, all right, 2009, James Cameron's Avatar, one of the most expensive, ambitious films ever made, whatever, okay? Totally mediocre. It's fine, it's perfectly functional, but it's very mediocre. It's nothing particularly profound as a story. And he very clearly cared about telling that story. It was very much a passion project for him. And he had huge amounts of money. Yeah, so there's that element. Who's your favorite character in House of the Dragon if you consider the adult and child portrayals separate? Oh, I really, really liked child Alicent and Rhaenyra. I really liked their youngest versions. I thought that was really cool. But I like Alicent as a character, just because she's so much different to the books, and she's so much better in the series than she is in the books. Yeah. And then, of course, there's elements of it. And then, of course, just because you write a good story doesn't mean it's directed well or acted well, whatever. There's so many layers for what makes a good TV series that it can fail in so many different ways. You can see this in House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon, the episodes are written fantastically, But like the lighting from the last episode was terrible. Like it's noticeably bad. Like that's a way in which the story got worse, and like you got a bit taken out of it because you're looking at this and you're going, I know this was filmed during the day and it looks bad when you've scaled it to be, you know, that sort of thing. Can we ask questions that are off topic, or should we stick to House of the Dragon and Rings of Power? No, you guys go ahead and totally ask me any questions. I don't really have that many more notes on Rings of Power specifically, and it's like nearly 8 o'clock here, so I don't know. I'll just keep kind of going through questions. All right. Yeah. Is a good story enough usually to cover up for bad acting, directing, and lighting? There's plenty of stuff which is not filmed in a particularly interesting way that is like really fun, really good. I'm not someone who knows much about the production side of things, and so it doesn't really bother me that much. Yeah, so I assume so. Have you seen Arcane? I have seen Arcane. Yeah, but like House of the Dragon very much has managed to tell a really good story. One of the things that I've been really impressed with is that they haven't overused the dragons. Like, holy crap, they have not. It's called House of the Dragon, and they have tons of dragons around, and they are not overusing them. Like, they are using them very sparingly, which I thought is just a genius decision to make that. To make that story work, you've got to sell us on the characters and on the scenery and on the story, and so not the spectacle, right? Not the spectacle. And like that's the thing with Rings of Power, is that the battle in the Southlands was a beautiful spectacle. The cavalry riding in at the dawn and taking out all of the orcs. Beautiful spectacle, all right? Don't care about the characters in the Southlands. I just didn't. They didn't sell me on Theo and Bronwyn as a mother-son pair. They didn't sell me on Theo's dark story, supposedly. They didn't sell me on Arendir and Bronwyn's romance. All right, they just didn't. So yeah, that's fair. Surprised the reactions here have seemed negative. I thought it was a good episode. It actually made me enjoy watching the Halfwoods for once. They got to be fun and charming instead of all doom and boring. There were good elements to the episode. And I think that if the story like kind of started here, then it would have been a better start, you know, or in some sense. But I think for most people, the story on the whole and the series as a whole has been so soured that one final episode, be good or not, is not going to change their mind. And that's totally fine, you know. I think that's kind of my impression, is that even though I think this episode was a tad better, I do think it is one of the better episodes of the series, partly because we got to actually see elements of Tolkien's story. But it's on such a weak, shaky under foundation, right? It's just, yeah, no, not that great. So can you do a video on writing romance? I'm not particularly proficient at writing romance. My book actually is about, technically, an estranged married couple. After their kid dies. I don't think of it as a romance story. It's a story where a relationship, it's a story where a relationship is a core point of tension. Question: do you ever conlang or use fictional languages? It's actually not an area that interests me very much. My stories tend to be very small scale stories, very small cast. Small setting, and stakes are very personal. You're not going to find a lot of battle scenes in my books, and in my stories. You can read my stories. I think they're in the link down the description. They're not all there, but some of them are there. And And so like fictional languages don't tend to come up that much. Tim, I want you to get harsh, unfiltered HBO style content. Is that what you guys want? You guys want me to be? Is that what you want? You want me to be like brutal? I mean, I don't know how old this water is. But what would be your ideal series to turn into a show? Oh, I would love to see. What would I love to see? I would probably, like, as a TV series or a film, I think I'd love to see Artemis Fowl done right, just because that's a childhood favorite of mine. Nah, be yourself, get mean. If you had the Silmarillion at your disposal, which plotline would you choose to make the show about? Numenor. Numenor's the best story to make the story about. Either that or the War of the Sauron and the Elves with the destruction of Eregion. Yeah. Who is the author to whom you compare yourself most? That's really interesting. It would almost definitely be one of two authors. It'd be Jeff Vandermeer and it'd be John Green. I mean, I've followed John Green for years because I've always been in the Vlogbrothers community. And so his books have a very special place in my heart, especially because they touch so much on mental illness, and my own writing touches a lot on mental illness. It's just an area that I really like writing about. I like writing characters who are not only in conflict with the world in some way, but that conflict with the world comes from conflict up here, in a really debilitating way. So like the book that I'm writing at the moment, is about a mum who is grieving for her child and is like just totally absorbed in her grief. There's depression and suicide stuff going on there. Should I have said that word? YouTube's gonna like silence me now. So I like writing those stories. It's that tends to be what I tend to do. Jeff Vandermeer writes a lot of really interesting personal stories. Like he writes his book Annihilation was just like life-changing for me. It's a sci-fi story that is deeply introspective, but it's also very, very sci-fi. And so I like that element where it's like the sci-fi element is 100% there, but it's also really up here. And that's the sort of story that I write. If you feel brave enough, would you try writing something out of your comfort zone? Yes, that's what I've been definitely trying to do. I mean, I would love to write a murder mystery at some point. Pie Team, thank you very much for the 25 Hong Kong dollars. Peter here, off topic. Please review Disney show Amphibia by Matt Braley on storytelling and how to improve season 3 as a whole, such as USA Freeze Amphibia. I don't know quite what that means. I know that Matt Braley follows me on Twitter. I don't know how that happened, but I know he does. I have not seen it, but I have been told. People are really 50-50 on me being mean. See, here's the thing, right? Like, I know that you can get clicks by being just like real tear everybody apart, that sort of stuff. I know that just being real harsh, being real cruel and stuff like that gets a lot of views. I've tried my best to not be that sort of thing, and it's actually, honestly, doing reviews for Rings of Power has been quite eye-opening for me, because over on the second channel, I'm kind of like, well, this is a negative review. I don't know what to say. like, you know, I know that I have a lot of negative feelings, and I tend to focus, like in my on writing videos, I use positive examples. I don't use negative examples all that often. Um, and it's usually because, like, I've consumed a lot of content, and I tend to consume stuff as good, not bad. So yeah, it's been an interesting learning experience where I've been like being a lot more critical in these videos, in these reviews. It's I'm really thirsty. Oh well, if I die, that's it. But I also know that people, I mean, actually, I want to ask you guys, this is something that I have, I guess, tried to make part of my hashtag brand, so I would like your thoughts on it. Does my attempt to be level-headed, or kinda with my critiques, or less, more positive as a focus, does that factor into how you guys perceive my content? Is that something that even occurs to you? Or is it something... I mean, I don't know. Robert Petit, episode 8 of House of the Dragon honestly reminded me of Shakespeare, drew to mind Richard II and Henry IV, particularly with Ceres Nelson's kids. Yeah, I mean, you gotta remember that George R. R. Martin writes very Shakespearean stories, and House of the Dragon is a tragedy. It's a tragedy to come. Oh goodness, I've missed a lot of... yeah. There's nothing wrong with being extremely negative about bad content. Angry Joe does it, and I don't see any problem with it. I mean, when you say it like that, when you put it in a vacuum, obviously it's hard to object to that, isn't it? I mean, I've done a video where I talked for 1.5 hours or 2 hours or something about how terrible Avatar, The Last Airbender film is, and it's a lot of fun to do. But I think there's a difference between talk about negative content as being bad and clearly playing into some of the worst tendencies of the internet. That you know, the worst parts where which you know, have some unfortunate roots at times. You know, I have a friend who has inadvertently made his audience so that they don't tend to click on positive things very much. If he makes a video about something and says this is great, like, he just doesn't get as many views. Whereas if he clicks on something and it's negative, and it's always something, you know, like how to ruin this or something, with a really screwed up face on the thumbnail, right? Like, that's, his audience clicks on that, and he doesn't like that. He's like, I sort of fell into this by accident. So I don't want to end up in that sort of position, you know. And I think there is a difference between being willing to critique bad stuff and choosing to play into the worst parts of the internet. You know. If you dislike something, you ought to express it, but that doesn't mean being nasty. Yeah, I do agree. You mean, which, as I said, I've been doing reviews on Rings of Power, and that, like, actually, that's another thing, is that, like, I did a video on Rings of Power, my last episode, and as the title, I said, Rings of Boring More Than Bad. And I talked in depth about how I think that Rings of Power is bad. Like, most of the video is pretty much saying, this whole story fell flat, because we're not invested in Numenor, we're not invested in the Southlands. Khazad-dûm is the only good storyline, and even then, it's underpinned by this whole mithril stuff, which is really contrived. And I talk about that in the video, but I get a bunch of comments, of course, saying you you know, going so far as to say that I'm defending it, all because I said it's more boring than bad. And the point of that being that I think that the show is boring, and that's a major critique of it, is that it's very uninteresting. The twists aren't interesting, the revelations aren't interesting, the characters aren't interesting, the way that they talk on screen is not interesting most of the time. They're not fun to watch, you know. And I said that because of that, we tend to notice bad things more. And we're a lot more forgiving of stuff that we are enjoying. And I talk about how in Doctor Who, if you take just a tiny bit of a closer look at it, falls apart, all right? It is not a story that cares about logical consistency or anything like that. And that's fine, okay? It's fine. It's not, it doesn't matter. It's a fun, silly show. And it doesn't really bother me. But if I was bored while watching Doctor Who, then that stuff annoys me more. And I think that's definitely happened in Rings of Power. There's things in Rings of Power which I think annoy people more because they are bored, you know. And there's things that annoy me more because they're bored. And that's also, on top of it, not being particularly good. But those are two different elements of the critique. And some people, I literally replied to one person, I said, I spent most of this video talking about how it's not very good. What do you people want from me? And they say, you don't say it's bad. And it's like, you want a slogan from me. You want me to just say in a thumbnail, this show is awful. And it's like, it has redeemable qualities. It has parts which are okay, which are fine. But what people are so often looking for is just this tagline slogan where you say, it's bad. It's awful. The worst show ever made. Terrible on every level. Like, people just want to lean into that. And I find that really frustrating. Really frustrating. Nathaniel, I think you've been gentle and kind but honest in your critiques, and I've appreciated it. Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you very much for the donation as well. That's very nice. Yeah. So and like it's I very much do also I do also very much go through my critiques, right? And I mean, look, I played into like that sort of stuff for the Last Airbender film. I titled the video "The Last Airbender is the worst film ever made. Here's why," you know. But it's a bit of a meme at that point. It's a bit of a meme at that point. Also, thank you everyone for the kind comments. It's very nice of you to say that. Everyone, I can't even read all of them. Yeah. Whew. So people want confirmation of their own opinion, you know. Where is the line? So there's that element of it. And so I don't know what I'm going to title the Rings of Power video. I was thinking like the Rings of Power was boring. Here's why. The Rings of Power didn't. I'm probably going to go with the Rings of Power didn't work. Here's why. Or just the Rings of Power didn't work, because I think that I don't think it functionally worked very well. So yeah, and I want to talk about it in that sort of sense. Yeah, I guess. So that's a whole thing. And for the record, like, the YouTube at the moment has definitely... I used to title videos just like on writing final battles, and like the video would do extremely well, you know. And it's frustrating because you sort of have to be a bit more clickbaity. The algorithm has definitely changed. I mean, it's always evolving. It is always evolving. And it's always the algorithm's always evolving, and you have to adapt to it. But at some point you've kind of got to like go. At some point you've kind of got to go. Okay, the thumbnail and the title is just to get people in, and what really matters is the content that you put in the video. Yeah. Samuel Kirk. I don't think I missed anyone. Samuel Kirk, moving forward, how would you set up the next season to recover from the failings of the first season, emphasizing the good elements as well? Oh, so where would I go from here? Wow. So assuming this whole first season is the way it is. Okay. That is hard. Where would I go from here? I would have Hellbrand, I would have Sauron in some way return to Eregion and work with Celebrimbor and the Gwaithmadain, his group of craftsmen, in secret. He would, because Celebrimbor doesn't know who Sauron is, but Elrond and Galadriel do, and so he would basically be working with Anatar, Sauron in secret, and they would make the 7 and they would make the 9 and stuff like that. And then at the same time, they would be forging this relationship between the elves and the dwarves. And that's how we, leading up to kind of the Moria door that we know so well, because that's sort of how this comes out of. It's Celebrimbor's friend with a dwarf called Navi. Where would the tension be in that? I mean, the tension is kind of that we know this is Sauron, but that's probably not enough. You'd probably need some kind of tension in there that I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But I would have that be a center point of the story. And then I would focus on kind of the struggle between the faithful and the Kingsmen inside Numenor, with kind of Ar-Pharazôn rising and becoming more powerful, and Tamriel falling out of grace and eventually being usurped. And I would probably tell the story of... I would probably somehow have Nori and the Blue Wizard go down to Harad. I know it's not technically Rund, but we could probably somehow make it so he goes through Rund down to Harad, and then we tell a story inside Harad, which intersects with Numenor's colonial power, and them kind of taking over there. Yeah, I don't know. Redeemable qualities is how... Thank you, Billio, for the £9. That's €9. That's pounds, I think. I don't know the symbols very well. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Redeemable qualities is what I tell myself to keep going. Your channel and books really pulled me through the last 2 years. Don't be too hard on yourself. You're good. Thank you very much. That's very, very kind. So, yeah. It's kind of hard to see where they would go in this, because, I don't know. Celebrimbor has to work more with Hellbrand in secret. Has to, right? Has to. Unless they're really butchering that part of the story. I don't know. On another note, guys, I'm working on a whole video about... It started off as a video about the Fire Nation and war crimes. And then it's turning into a huge project about Japanese war crimes and the American cover-up and how the Fire Nation stuff. So that is going to be a big, intense video, and that is coming, and I'm very excited. In the last 3 days, I have read 5 books, over 1,000 pages, 1,200 pages on this topic. It's insane. I don't even know what it's going to be, but it's going to be fun. Yeah, the whole video just kept on spiraling and getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I've got to process. I have to process 35,000 words now. So yeah, it's getting pretty intense. It started off basically talking about how the Fire Nation, here's what the Fire Nation did during the war, here's what they did in the aftermath to explore the nature of war crimes and how we deal with them. And then I was like, okay, the Fire Nation is very clearly a parallel to Japan in many respects. They sort of backed off on that, but it is fundamentally. And so I want to talk about those two. Yeah, so, and it's going to be focusing on Unit 731, which, if you know what it is, you know what it is. But if you don't. Now, so it'll be unsatisfying if Galadriel and Elrond just conveniently don't tell Celebrimbor, the other ring bearer, that Halbrand is Sauron. There needs to be... Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Celebrimbor, like, it's got to be that Galadriel tells Celebrimbor, this guy's Sauron, and then Celebrimbor just doesn't talk about it, or doesn't know. Sorry, Celebrimbor like doesn't believe her, or Celebrimbor goes, nah, Sauron's good again. He's my buddy. He's my buddy. And Galadriel's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And Celebrimbor's like, I'm making rings. So, yeah. Because, like, technically Galadriel did not tell. She's just like, Halbrand better not be allowed back. And Elrond's like, why? And she's like, I'm not telling you. I don't know. That's the thing. Yeah, Celebrimbor may be too wise. I don't know. Oof. It'll be weird, though. I know you're a fan of John Green's writing, but have you read Hank Green's books, Duology? I own them and I haven't read them. Oh god, I need to tell you about my cringe interaction with him. I met him at the Australian VidCon and I absolutely flummoxed it. I completely there's a B word that I'm missing. Buckled. I completely bungled. I completely bungled. What a weird word. I do not use that word. It completely bungled my interaction with him. Butchered might be another one. It's where I said to him, oh, you're doing a sequel. That's pretty uncommon. And he said, for a fantasy novel? And I was like, oh, yeah. For a sci-fi novel? I'm like, yeah. And then he moved away. I hope he doesn't remember my face, and I hope he doesn't know who I am. That was very cringe. Very, very cringe. High cringe. There's a bunch. I mean, I'm sure that I would totally screw it up if it happened with other people too. Yeah, there's a bunch of YouTubers, so I'm sure that if I met them, it'd be yeah. Sorry, Paul Putter, 70 ZAR. Thank you very much. It's very kind. Hi, this is a drop in the bucket, but the least I can do is say thanks for the advice in your videos. I'm using to try and run my novel. Thanks for everything. That's very kind. I very much like writing videos. They're just a core part of what I did. They really changed the channel, and I've got a video on writing descriptions coming out. And I can tell you which videos are what books are referenced in that. Let me see. This is on writing environmental descriptions. We got The Handmaid's Tale, Annihilation, Piranesi, The Lord of the Rings, Depression. It's literally just called Depression. Sin Chao, The Adulterous Woman, The Way of Kings, Architectural Constants, It, The Tattooist of Auschwitz, Waiting for Daddy, and Bear Town. Yeah, so that's that. No, someone might send. No, please don't send this to him. Don't clip me and don't clip me and send that to to Hank. The Cyberpunk 2077 video was amazing. Okay, so the Cyberpunk video is a really interesting story. Okay, I studied for that video for like 6 to 8 months. I was preparing to do that video for ages. All right, I read so many books. I read so many stories and did so many reading of papers and analyses and stuff. Like, oh my gosh, it's and I was doing this and I was like, I can't just title this Cyberpunk and analysis or whatever. It won't get the views. I was like, I have to talk about something more clicky, right? Because I've done so much research into this. I need this to land. So I decided to frame it as being discussing the Cyberpunk 2077, and I sort of did it in the lens of that. But really, if you scratch beneath the surface, the whole video is, of course, an excuse for me to talk about the cyberpunk genre as a whole, because I really love it. I do think that, and of course, I'm really lucky because Cyberpunk 2077, I liked the game. I don't care about glitchy games. Most of my time, I play indie games which are made by like a couple of people and have no budget, and they're all real glitchy. It does not bother me in the slightest. I just don't care. So it doesn't matter to me, and so I just wanted to talk about the story and the themes, and I think there's some interesting stuff to discuss in there. So I framed it inside that, and the video, I was like, okay, so that'll be more clicky. And the video, I titled it, Cyberpunk is better than you think. Which of course turned out really well, because it got way better with time. Apparently Cyberpunk 27 is like a fantastic game now or something. And the video started off really, really poorly, and I was so disappointed because it was like, I spent so much time working on this and it's failing. And then it didn't. And then people engaged with it and it shot up. And it's nearly at 1 million views right now, which is just insane. It's insane. It has done so well for me in the long run. And I'm so happy with how it's performed. So that was very, very cool. But it was a very, very fun book, and I also, of course, went over the top and I made a costume for it, and I've never made a costume before. I've always wanted to make a cosplay, so that was really cool. I want to do, and then the Power of Abandoned Places. That was another really cool video, which people really reacted to really positively. I loved doing that. This video on the Japanese war crimes in Unit 731 is probably going to be a long video, and it's going to be a pretty in-depth one. I didn't really realize how big it was going to get, but the thing is, what'll often happen is I love using fiction to talk about I love using about fiction to talk about real world issues, basically. You know, I love looking at or real world just discussions. You know, like I love using fiction talking about geopolitics or whatever, or industrialism. But often what happens is that I'll pick these topics, and then the more research I'll do in them, and I'll be like, oh, I can't just do a 10-minute brief thing. I can't just do a 20-minute brief thing. If I'm gonna do this, I need to do this justice. And so that's very much what happened with this, is that like the Japanese war crimes and the American cover-up stuff with it got so deep and so much. I'm like, I can't just summarize this. I need to do this justice. And so more and more, are you going to try not to censor it? Yeah, there's a lot of details that I'm going to have to censor and I can't share. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a version of it that goes to YouTube and a version of it that I think goes to Nebula, which is the streaming service. I swear I'm not doing a sponsorship right now. It's just, I'm part of an agency, a group of YouTubers, blah, 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 blah. They have a streaming service which doesn't have those restrictions, so I can put that on there. That's all I'm saying. So I'll be able to include those elements in there. I'll include as much as I can in the main YouTube video because, you know, I don't want to like hide stuff really. But I mean, you're talking about some of the most horrible acts humans have ever done. You're talking about stuff that makes you puke. You know, it's hard to explain how horrible this is. And for context, people think of Joseph Mengele and like the Nazi doctors as some of the worst criminals in history. Estimates say that Japanese doctors during World War II killed more patients in their experiments than the Nazi ones did. Up to 10 times more. That's the sort of stats we're looking at here. And I won't go into it more than that, but that video is very much, yeah. So that's going to be talked about. Can I please tell you, as an aspiring writer in your YouTube channel, are the best thing that's ever happened to me? That's very kind. It's very kind of you to say. Am I going to talk about Edge Runner? I haven't seen Edge Runner. I really want to, but look, honestly, I don't watch a huge amount of TV, and currently I'm having to watch Rings of Power, House of the Dragon, and I've also just gotten into Breaking Bad. Please don't give me any spoilers. It's like, yeah, I am really enjoying that. I've been told for years that it's incredible, and I've only just gotten into it. Honestly, the Southern Raiders is an episode of Adler I have issues with, because the whole just forgive war criminals bit, like, yes, forgive you, but also seek justice above all. See, but the point of that episode is that she can't forgive. She doesn't forgive. Like, Aang comes to her and says, I'm so glad you picked the path of forgiveness. And Katara pretty explicitly says, like, I didn't forgive him, I just couldn't kill him. And I think it's a very different thing. That's part of the reason I like that episode so much, is that it does delve into that complexity by saying you don't need to, you know, you don't need to forgive. Sometimes these traumas go so deep that we can't, you know, and also that there's not a moral necessity to. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. So there is all of that. Are you a weeb, Tim? No, not particularly. I do watch anime, like the occasional anime. I'm really into Attack on Titan. I love Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, and I've seen Death Note. I liked that, and I've seen a couple of others. But like, I mean, I've seen the ones that, you know, everyone's seen. the entry level anime. I don't have any interest in watching like One Piece or anything like that. Edge Runners is something that I would like to get into, but yeah, as I said, not super. I don't watch a huge amount of TV, so this is all kind of. I sort of have to very much pick and choose, you know. Yeah. Anyways, okay. Guys, if you have any questions for me, put them in the chat. I will do some quick fire questions, answering some questions if you've got them, and then I'm going to tie it up. This can be questions about anything, about me, about writing, about Rings of Power, about House of the Dragon, about whatever else. Stick them in the chat. This is your chance to ask me questions before I vanish, because I know a lot of people don't necessarily get those questions. What about reading manga? Do you watch Murphy or Daniel's videos on manga and what they read? I don't tend to watch their videos on them. I actually got so... I wanted Attack on Titan to finish so badly because I thought this was the final season. I got to the end, I was like, that's not the end. And so I bought the end of the manga and read it. I got so frustrated. So that's the only manga I've actually read. I bought both your on-writing and world-building books. Do you do personal consults or reads? I do a sort of thing in Patreon, but it's not a way that I tend to kind of do a lot of stuff. I don't tend to do that a huge amount. It's very time consuming and it's just not where my energies have to be at the moment, I'm afraid. Have you read any Naomi Novik? Spinning Silver is good. No, but I really, really want to. Apparently she's incredible. She's like the Napoleonic dragon stuff, which I think is fantastic as a theme. How are the pets doing? Momo, I'm pretty sure, is at least partially senile. Willow is doing fantastically. One Piece is a heroic endeavor, but as we asked Daniel, yeah, look, he has tried. If I'm going to get into another anime, it'll be Steins Gate or Serial Lane Experiments or something. Possibly Violet Evergarden. Those are ones that have definitely interested me. Oh my gosh. Have you seen Sword Art Online? No, I haven't. Lane is good. I mean, seriously, regarding mental health, and Perfect Blue are the best. Yeah, that's sort of what keep me into them. Also, I love, like, experimental stuff. This is my question. Do you still play Netrunner? I would love to play Netrunner more than I do, but don't have many people who like to play it with me. My partner is, like, the person I play with most, and she doesn't like the game. So, no, I don't get to play very often. Do you have any tips on writing a short story? Don't just try and write a long story. If you're used to writing longer stories, you know, with large cast of characters and big stakes and stuff like that, don't just try and write a long story short. Don't try and just squeeze. It doesn't work well. I would say my personal way I typically tend to do it is I do pick 1 or 2 characters, maybe 3, and have them centered around a main choice, an interesting choice. So you can explore what that choice means for them in a personal way and then do that. That's like my format. It's not like how to write a short story, but I think it was a good starting point for me to just be like, really narrow it down, make it a short thing, make it just about a thing so that there is progress between beginning and end, you know, scope. Will you do something on the Cold War or mind control? No, that's not on the cards at the moment. Have you seen the James Summerton's video on Rings of Power? I actually did glance through it, and I do know James a little bit. We've sparingly talked a couple of times, I think, and I haven't seen it though. I've seen a couple of his videos. Any anime series you'd like to analyze? I would love to have a look at Attack on Titan, to be honest. How's the lamb in New Zealand? I'm not a huge fan of lamb, but New Zealand lamb is apparently very good. And cosplay when? Unlikely. How is Mishka? Mishka is dead. Has been for a few years. What did you think of Arcane? Absolutely phenomenal. Brilliant story. Incredible. I'll definitely be watching season 2. If you could see any one scene from the Silmarillion film to the best it could be, it'd be Fingolfin's duel with Morgoth, probably. Wounding him 7 times. That would probably... No, it'd probably be Shelob draining the trees, I reckon. Ungoliant. God. Ungoliant draining the trees. Do you consider Rings of Power canonical? No. It's not canonical. It wasn't written by Tolkien. Or Christopher, I guess. It's its own canon. In the same way that Game of Thrones has its own canon, it's separate from the book canon. Oh, I've lost my place. Do you think of the idea of making the next Game of Thrones as a general... Do you think of the idea of making the next Game of Thrones as a general change of... Oh, yeah, 100%. Every single studio out there saw the success of Game of Thrones and said, okay, 1, big budget. 2, big cast. 3, fantasy. 4, long story, right? Looking fantastic. Okay, every single production company out there said, that's what we need. That's what we need. And the only one which has done it right is, and this is going to be a hot take, The Witcher. The Witcher is clearly evolving out of the trend of Game of Thrones, but it is done in a way that is fresh. It feels different, and it is very... And I actually enjoyed the series. I gotta be honest. I think that... I mean, you like Geralt, you like Yennefer, you like, Ciri in it. It's just... Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I think that it played into that same audience while also evolving on it. And so I think I was quite impressed with that. Do you think it would have been better if Rings of Power focused on one story and expanded slowly? Yeah, the problem with Second Age is that the stories do very much ill interconnect, but they interconnect in really inconvenient ways. It would have probably been better, though, if they just did the Fall of Numenor story. That'd be my bet. Do you read indie novels? Yes. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by indie, but I do definitely read smaller authors. Do you have any advice to someone planning to move to New Zealand? You need a car in New Zealand. We don't have public transport, not really. It's very expensive to live here as well. It's also very far away from everywhere. And also, if you are living here, keep in mind that we don't have a lot of variety of stuff. So, like, say you want a type of, I don't know, a type of toaster or whatever, okay? And it's a very specific type of toaster. And over in the US, you might have a million different brands to choose from. You're probably only going to get, like, one type of that particular toaster. Like, you can get lots of different... Oh, this is a bad example. There's not a huge amount of variety and choice, necessarily. So there are downsides, even though it's gorgeous. Is there a third world building book in the works? Yes, there is. I only have enough material for it for... I probably still need to do a good few more months more work on it. But the likelihood is that it'll be coming out next year, at the end of next year. That'll be my bet, is that All Writing World Building Volume 3, end of next year. That is the first time I've said that. But thank you, everyone. It sold like 60,000 copies, which is insane. Who was the man with the Brandyfoots? It was one of the Blue Wizards. At least that's my impression, because he's heading off to Run. Do you think people in general are over grimdark? House of Dragon accepted? No. I don't think people are over grimdark, but I think there is a market for lighter fantasy that hasn't been fully tapped into yet. And those are two different things. What is your take on the steampunk genre? I like the steampunk genre. Numenor should have been steampunk. Definitely. I mean, I don't write it, and I haven't seen too much. I mean, you can call His Dark Materials steampunk, potentially. I don't really know. But His Dark Materials is one of the best TV shows on at the moment. Are you excited for the next House of Dragon? 100%. I'm loving House of the Dragon. What advice would you give content creators trying to start their journey on YouTube, whether they be fellow New Zealanders or not? There's two bits of advice. You've got to do something new, or you've got to do something better. That tends to be that's the age-old advice. I happened to luck into gaps in the market that I didn't really realize were there, but I fell into them. So people weren't making How to Train Your Dragon or Avatar content or writing content in the way that I was doing it. In fact, I made the writing content because I was like, why isn't there this content? And I made the Avatar content because I was like, why isn't there this content? So look for those niches, or do it just better than everyone else. And that's hard. I realize that is not easy advice. It's broad advice. But also take heart that, even though algorithms and online social media and stuff like that makes it feel like it's your fault if things don't go well, if things don't work, you can look at people, and I do this all the time. I'm the worst person for it. I will look at people and I will go, I put in so much more work into this piece of media and it's not doing nearly as well. Why not? What am I possibly doing wrong? The algorithm doesn't care about that. And it's really complicated and it's really demoralizing at times, but it's not your fault if things don't necessarily go that well. But try long enough and something will work eventually. I tried a million things, I guess, and only one of them ended up working out. Yeah, so there's that. Good luck, though. Are you going to put the stream up as a video on your YouTube channel? I might leave it up. I don't think so, though. Question, can you recommend a New Zealand myth or urban legend to learn about? New Zealand has Māori mythology, which is the mythology of the indigenous peoples to New Zealand. So there's all of that, which you can read about online. But when people talk about like myths and urban legends, what they typically mean is like, Robin Hood type stuff. But New Zealand, as kind of like a, culture that it is now, hasn't been around for a huge amount of time. So those sort of things haven't really had time to evolve. But I'm trying to think. I'm sure one will come to me afterwards. Yeah, no, I don't know, sorry. When the wind blows just right, can you still feel the sting of season 8 Thrones? No, do you mean in House of the Dragon? Like, House of the Dragon is not made by the same people that did season 8 of Game of Thrones. Like, there's no taint there. And George R. R. Martin has definitely hinted at the structural differences there. Have you ever been embarrassed to write something because of the subject matter? I've been embarrassed about my writing after the fact, not embarrassed at the start. My last book, I once wrote a book which was a clear rip-off of like Fault in Our Stars type stuff, like the kid with he's had a heart problem and he died and that sort of thing. It was meant to be like a repudiation of that genre, which again, Fault in Our Stars is meant to be a repudiation of that genre. But it was not very good, and so I'm ashamed of writing that, I guess. When is On Writing and World Building Volume 3 coming out? End of next year is my tentative date. I will probably have enough material for then, and then I've just got to put it together. I've got to edit it and add more stuff, and yeah. There we go. As much as people dislike The Witcher, I enjoy the series even though it wasn't perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but I also haven't read the books. I don't really know. Oh gosh. There are a lot of questions. I thought I was nearly out of questions. Apparently not! Are you excited for the new Witcher series by Project Red? Is it in the new Witcher series, like the Netflix Witcher series? I mean, I will probably watch it. It took me ages to watch the second content. But like the first season was like really creative in how it told its story. And I watched it the first time I watched it, I didn't enjoy it very much. And then I watched it a second time with my fiance. And watching it a second time, knowing about the timeline differences, made me enjoy it so much more. Yeah. They say the fauna in Australia is really likable to kill you. Is the same applicable in New Zealand? No. New Zealand is the most passive, placid place on the planet. Nothing here can kill you. We don't even have snakes. We don't even have spiders that are capable of killing you. We have spiders which can maybe give you a bite, and then it's fine. And those spiders are super, super rare. Like, we don't have anything that can kill you. That's part of the reason all of our birds are dying out, because we brought along pests that killing them all, because they all lost the ability to fly because they didn't need it, because nothing could kill them. That's how not dangerous it is here. Do you think Warhammer 40k show will be successful? I don't know. I don't know 40k very well. Seen you... What? Have you watched... No, I have not watched that. My only real hook at the moment is one of the few, if not only, New Zealand-based storytime animators. I'll keep at it and hope I get better over time. Good luck! LOTR Rings of Power, but I'm just... How do you find the motivation to write? Feels paradoxical that I love writing, but I'd never want to work on it. Look, a lot of people have stressful lives. You know, if you're working a job, if you've got kids, if you're, you know, if you've got a bunch of other obligations, which so many people do, it's really hard to find the time and motivation to write. I'm very lucky that I can incorporate that into my job. So I think, for start, you know, people should be forgiving of themselves in that regard. Finding motivation, I tend to find that reading is the best way to find motivation for me personally, because I'll read something and go, man, I wish I could write like this. I read this and go, man, I wish I'd come up with something, or I'll springboard a story off something I read. And that's the inspiration, is because it gives me something to aspire to, you know. Reading the Witcher books definitely makes it harder to enjoy the show. I have very much heard that. Every single person who's read the Witcher books has had very shaky opinions on the show, and that's totally fair. 100% fair. Do you spot kiwis in the wild, or are they super rare? Super rare. You're not going to spot a kiwi in the wild. Actually, it's funny, tourists will come here and they'll see a weka and they'll be like, oh, it's a kiwi. Wekas are not kiwis. Wekas kind of look a little bit like kiwis, but no, you will not spot a kiwi in the wild. For one, they're nocturnal. Two, they are deep, deep in the forest. Three, they are usually in protected areas because they are dying at rapid rates. We're losing 2% of the population every year, basically. A book that makes me question my existence. Oh, there was one that I read recently. Look, read House of Leaves. Everyone should just read House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. Oh. Okay. All right. Have you been to the Lord of the Rings set in New Zealand? I have. I went up to the Shire when I was 21. Got any book recommendations? Oh, so many book recommendations. But for who? That's the question. You know? Read Shoko's Smile by Yun Choi. Just look up Choi Yun, I think her name is. It's the book I'm reading at the moment. It's a South Korean short story collection. It's very human, very nice, very well done. Made me feel things in very few pages. Aiden Hernandez Martino, thank you very much. It's very kind for the $12. Thanks for the advice about New Zealand. Good luck with the third book. And with regards to The Witcher, there's a new game series at CD Projekt Wizard. Oh, right. Okay. I still gotta work my way through Witcher 3 at the moment. Do you visualize scenes before you write them? I do, I guess. Doesn't everyone? I don't know. I definitely plan out where I'm going and I imagine them. I have a vivid picture of them in my mind. Anyways, that is me. Thank you everyone for staying and listening and questioning. It's very, very good. I have very much enjoyed this. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one, guys. Bye.